And relationships with parents can be interesting, definitely. Relationships with our parents are really, should be, and we strive for them to be really good and really strong relationships, because honestly, your parents probably know you better than anybody else in the world. I know my parents know me better than I know myself most of the time. I usually catch there's something going on with me before I realize that something's wrong. So I guess at first, I want to talk first about how my relationship, thank you, with my parents has worked as I was growing up. So like throughout my life, I always had like a really good life. I really did. I had a very blessed, I was very blessed. I didn't have to deal with a lot of issues. But of course, everybody has different issues with their parents. And you know, we have different struggles. Your parents, especially like every child's different. So even if you're the youngest, like you're still gonna have different issues with your parents as the youngest child than the oldest will, because everybody works differently, and your parents are gonna parent you differently than they parent your siblings. But something that was really different for me, or really unique with my relationship with my parents, was that my parents were not only my parents, but they were also my youth leaders. So if you guys have a problem with your parents, you probably go and like, if you're upset or something, you might go and like talk to your friend about it, right? Like, I'm annoyed with whatever's going on. I never did that because my best friends went to this church. And I never wanted, for your guys' friends, most of you, your friends, to them, your parents are just your parents. Like, to me, Mr. and Mrs. Laskowski are Levi's parents. You know what I mean? They're not. They don't have I don't have a different relationship outside of that with them. But for me and my friends, my friends with their relationship with my parents was not just they were my parents, but they were first their youth leaders. So if I ever had an issue with my parents, I never talked to anybody about it because they were their youth leaders, or I never talked to, and a youth leader, I will say this before I say what I'm gonna say. Your guys' youth leaders, like they're the people, these are some of the people you can trust the most, but they won't tell you, they won't say anything to anybody if they don't feel Holy Spirit telling them that they need to. If they don't need to bring it up to somebody, they don't feel that need, they're just gonna direct you within themselves and by themselves, and they won't bring it to somebody unless they feel the need to. But I never talked to them about things unless one of my parents told me to, because I never wanted something to go back to my parents if I was like upset with my parents. I'd rather just talk to my parents about it after I was upset. So because I had to talk to my parents about things if I was upset, or if I had an issue with my parents, or I had an issue with one of my friends, I didn't talk to other people about it because I never wanted to make my family look bad, or my parents look bad, or have somebody see them in a different light. I learned to really trust my parents and really lean on them for a lot of things, and I really learned to open up to my parents in a lot of ways. Something that my parents did that really helped me in my relationship with them was they had really, really open and honest conversations with me. So not only were they like somebody I really trusted, but they like worked to trust. So like they took the time to sit and talk with me about anything. Like, I remember my parents had the talk with me. I was probably like 8 years old. I was 10? No, because it was before 5th grade, Mom. Sorry. So I remember in 5th grade was when people started talking about that, like my friends at school and stuff, but my parents had already talked to me about it. So my face is all red now. I remember my parents had talked to me about it before anybody else did. So like my parents had a conversation with me about it. So like I had not only their opinions about it and like what the Bible said and stuff, but then my parents always made an effort to make sure that I also learned for like myself what I thought about different issues or different topics, whether it was in the Bible or if it was something really practical or if it was with a friendship or whatever it was. They had really open and honest conversations with me, so it made it very, very easy for me to have open, honest conversations with my parents. And I think that's really important, to have a really good, strong relationship with my parents. For me, it was, definitely. And I would encourage you guys, even if your parents aren't having those conversations with you, making an effort to try to have conversations with them. Maybe not right away if you don't feel you're at that level with your parents, maybe not right away telling them everything about your life if you don't feel comfortable about it, but taking little steps to talk to them more about what's important to you and like your passions and questions that you have. Something that for me was growing up, when I was about 14 or 15, I started keeping secrets from my parents, and I wasn't trusting them as much. And I think there was many things that affected me and my relationship with my parents from that. So I was more irritable at the house because I was hiding something. So then I wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna show anything. I tried so hard to hide it that I was making it obvious that I was hiding something. Do you know what I mean? When you're trying so hard to make sure nobody knows everything, but then everybody knows that something's going on because you're different, you're acting different. So that's what happened. That's what happened. I was doing, I obviously was doing something that I wasn't supposed to be, and my parents noticed. Also, my parents listen to Holy Spirit, and Holy Spirit is gonna tell your parents something is going on if they're listening to Holy Spirit, because he has your best interest and he knows your parents have your best interest at heart. So I was hiding things from my parents, and they ended up finding out, and it caused a really big rift between me and my parents for a while. I didn't ask my dad if I could say this first, to the point where for 3 days I did not talk to my dad, at all, because we were not in, we were upset, or I was upset and I was sad that I did something wrong, and then he was disappointed of what had happened and stuff, and I was taught, so that caused a really big rift, and that caused me to lose trust with my parents, that I had to, it took a long time for me to earn that trust back. And I wanted to be, I was talking to somebody about this topic when I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to speak about and how I wanted to incorporate, not just my own experience, but I also wanted to incorporate something that happened in the Bible to show you this, the importance of it and the importance of being honest with the people who care about you, but especially your parents, that spiritual covering, that the parental covering that they have over you. And I honestly, to be completely honest, I had no idea what I was going to use. So I was talking to this person because I was not, I was freaking out a little bit because I was I can't find a good example from this. And they were well, what about Adam and Eve? That's one of the biggest illustrations in the Bible of somebody hiding something and then causing something to happen because of that. And if you look in Genesis 3, and I'm reading it from the Message, it says, "When they heard the sound of God strolling in the garden in the evening breeze, the man and his wife hid in the trees of the garden, hid from God. God called out to the man, 'Where are you?' He said, 'I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid.'" And I think that's so sad. He was, God came down and was walking with Adam, and God is our father, right? But God was Adam's father. God created everybody, right? But there was no other human before Adam. So he didn't have a parent like I did. God was his father, the one who walked with him and who taught him and everything. And so, but he was hiding something because he knew he did something wrong, so he was hiding from God. And that not only caused sin and stuff, but that took away from his relationship with God, where God doesn't walk with us, and he didn't walk with Adam anymore, and he wasn't able to be in the same place as he was before. And that's what happens, that's what happens when we do the same thing with our parents, where when that happened to me, I wasn't talking to my dad. I talk a lot. Everybody knows. I talk a lot. And I really like to talk with my parents, about my day or about a bunch of random things. It doesn't really matter. I just like talking with my parents. But I didn't talk to my dad for 3 days because of things that I was hiding and the consequence that came from that. And it's important to learn not to do that. I think it's important to learn to be able to share with your parents, to be able to talk to your parents about what's going on, so that you don't have to experience that. So that you're able to have that strong parental, not only the covering, but that relationship and that bond that you need to have as a father and a daughter, or a mother and a daughter, or a mother and a son, and a father and a son. And I think that's super important in learning to trust your parents, to be able to have these open and honest conversations, not just about what's going on in your life, but then about the Bible and about controversial topics. I think that's one of the most important things that I have learned from then to now, is being able to have those conversations and trusting my parents. I've been able to talk to my parents about really controversial topics, like even like in the political arena, like being able to talk to my parents about things and not only learn what the Bible says and what they believe, but then also them encouraging me to figure out what I believe, and learning how to navigate that, and them teaching me how to navigate that. And that's really important. I know somebody who did not do that throughout their high school, middle school, high school years. They didn't do that, and then now they're in college, and all they did was they lived their life, and it wasn't that they were like hiding a bunch from their parents or anything, but they didn't have a super, super close, honest relationship with their parents. And I know this just like from being close to this person. So then now they're in college, and they always just listened to what their parents believed. Their parents told them what they were supposed to believe. They never asked questions, they never had a conversation about it. They just told them that's what you believe, and so then that's just what they believed. And now they're in college, and they're trying to figure out what they believe and the reasons behind what they believe, and they don't know. Like they have no idea. They're just like, well, this is wrong, but then what about when it says this in the Bible? Or like, what about this situation with this person? And they don't know, because they never were able to have conversations about what they believed and why they believed what they believed. And I just wanted to encourage you guys to be able to learn to want, not really to learn, but to want and to desire having a really good and strong relationship with your parents, to be able to trust your parents and to have a good relationship with your parents, and to be able to learn how to navigate your faith through the guidance of your parents.
What is authority? Authority is when someone has the power to tell someone else to go do something. So it could be like your boss, or your teacher, or your parent, or Cam. And it could be like your pastor or the president. They all have authority over someone. And so like usually at your houses, like your parents have the authority. And at my house, my older siblings have authority. So Cam would have authority over me, and I would have authority over Paris, and Paris would have authority over Murillo, and so on. And where's that? Hey Brianna, can you bring me my other notebook? It's right under that chair. Thank you. Okay. What is obedience? Obedience is when you're told to do something and so you go do it. So, has anyone ever had their parent ask them to go get something, but they don't really use it, like when you give it to them? Has anybody else ever been in that situation? Come on. And I've been in that situation multiple times. And so for example, one day I was playing Sims. Do you guys know what Sims is? Yes? Okay, well, for those of you who don't, Sims is this computer game, and you get to make your own people and dress them however you want and all that. So I was playing Sims, and my mom asked me to get her a cup of water. And I was busy playing Sims, like she could have asked any of my other siblings, but she asked me instead. So, and on Sims, I had so much to do. Make my person, get them their outfits, get them a house, get them a job. And so I had all this to do on Sims, but I went to go get her water, and all she did was take it and set it down. She didn't drink from it, she didn't take one sip at all. So, there's that. Has anyone ever been in a situation like that? So, well then, if you have, you know what it's like to be me, because I've been in that situation. Actually, I'm a little thirsty. Levi, could you go get me some water, please? Thank you. Another day when I was busy doing something, I was watching Lord of the Rings. Has anybody ever seen Lord of the Rings in here? Yeah? It's my favorite movie of all times. So I was watching it, and my dad asked me to go do the laundry, and I didn't want to do it because I was in this really good part, and so what was happening is Frodo, at the very last one, was taking the ring to Mount Doom, and he collapses because he was exhausted. And Sam, his friend who was with him on this journey, he was encouraging him to get up, but Frodo wouldn't. So what Sam decided to do was he threw, thank you. Sorry, 1 second.
I thought she was going to put it there. That's my time.
So, back to my story. What he decided to do was throw Frodo onto his shoulder and carry him all the rest of the way to Mount Doom. Like, best friend goals right there. Someone who's gonna take you the rest of the way. And stick with you on the whole journey too. I think everyone needs a friend like Sam. If you don't have a friend like Sam, you should get one. Mine's Brianna right there. So obviously I didn't want to do the laundry whatsoever. Actually, Marcos, can you fold those blankets for me right there? Can you come fold them? Thank you.
Welcome back.
And also, Lily, could you come up here please for a second? Just for a demonstration, just real quick. Okay, this is how frustrating things can get at my house. Okay, can you take 5 steps forward? Stop. Okay, now take 3 steps back. Stop, turn left. Take 5 steps left. Sorry, stop. Okay, now turn around and take 4 steps back. Stop. Like, isn't that kind of frustrating? You don't know where to go. I know that wasn't a very good demonstration. Not Lily's fault, my fault. But it's pretty confusing. Thank you, Marcos, for folding those.
Yeah, no problem.
So it's pretty confusing. You have one person over here telling you, go do this, and then you have another one telling you, go do that. And so it gets mixed up, and it's your fault somehow. So that was kind of like today. I was asked to speak today, and I didn't really want to because I don't like speaking in front of people. But actually, I'm kind of comfortable now, telling people what to do. So like, I didn't want to. I also didn't think I'd have enough time to come up with something to talk about because it was like such a last minute thing. So like, but even though like I was willing to do that, I like, well, let me rephrase it. It was last minute, but I chose to do it willingly anyways, knowing that I'd be blessed and I'd be blessing who asked me to do it as well. And it's also like another thing for me to like overcome my nervousness of speaking in front of people. And so there's that as well. Does someone have a Bible on them? Like, even on your phone? And okay. Could you get Hebrews 6:10 for me? And would you be willing to read that too? Okay.
6:10?
Yeah, through 15.
That's a lot. Okay.
For God is not so unjust as to overlook your work and the love that you showed for his sake in serving the saints, as you still do. And we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness, to have the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, "Surely I will bless you and multiply you." And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise.
Thank you. Okay, so my takeaway on that verse is, well, by honoring others, you're honoring God. And God doesn't forget what you do for him or for other people. He doesn't forget that. And so that's why I asked some of you to do things for me. Because by you doing that, like Marco's folding the blankets, and Levi giving me my water, and Ange reading the verse for me, and Brianna giving me my notebook, you were honoring me, and that was also honoring God. So that's it.
Coming home was a really last minute trip, super last minute. But I just really wanted to come home and get encouragement from you guys, especially just because every time I come back and I hear from you and I see you all, I just get so encouraged and fired up again to go back and do just kind of the schooling I'm in. Oh, sorry. My voice is so weak after not singing for 6 months. So it's whoops. But when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to share with you guys, the story of Ruth popped in my head. How many of you know the story of Ruth? It's okay if you don't, because I'm in Bible school and I didn't know it until I read it. Whoops. Not gonna lie. It's kind of fitting to kind of the theme that has been happening tonight with just the verse that was given for you guys to memorize, and what Keegan had said, and what oh my word, David. What David said. I'm so sorry. I know your name. I just so wow. Wow, that was bad. But I want to talk about Ruth, and normally when people talk about Ruth, they talk about the person Ruth, but I actually want to kind of focus on Naomi, who is Ruth's mother-in-law. So in this story, you guys probably know how Ruth, Ruth and Naomi, they go back to the new land, right? Or not new land, the old land. They go back to Bethlehem. And Ruth is sent to go and work in Boaz's field. And eventually, Boaz buys her to get married, and he redeems her family line, and then that leads to David, right, King David. So that's the story that is really well known. But Naomi is an interesting character. So her and her husband, they were living in Bethlehem, right? And there was a famine going on, so they thought it'd be best to leave the promised land that the Lord had promised and go into Moab. And they thought that they'd be able to get some better provision right there. While they're in Moab, and they were there for a few years, so this had become home, right? So it became home to Naomi. While they're there, her husband passes away, and her 2 sons pass away. So all she's left with is her and her 2 daughter-in-laws. So she no longer has lineage, right? She no longer has her family name being carried on. Nobody there to work anymore. So her and her 2 daughter-in-laws, they go back to Bethlehem, and Naomi rejects them. It's pretty much hey, go back to your mother's house, go back to your mom, go find somebody to get married to. You're still young, you can still get married. Naomi is rejecting her family, right? In the tragedy that happened, she rejects her family. And then later on in verse 20, she rejects her own name. And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." And Mara means bitter. Like, that's what that means. And in these days, the name you were given had so much meaning. Like, it was a God-given name. Like, they chose names on purpose. And kind of like what your name meant, that ended up like kind of being the course of your life. So Naomi means pleasant, but she wanted to change her name to bitter. So she's rejecting her God-given name. And like in the tragedy that she's facing, you can see that she's just rejecting God in general. And I think this is like so relevant to us today, because I think like a lot of times like we'll be in situations where we don't hear God, we're confused, we're hurt, we're in pain, and like we just like reject God. We're like, I don't know where he is, I'm done, like I'm just gonna like reject the people that I'm around, like reject my community, reject my family, and I'm just gonna be by myself, and I'm gonna be bitter in this, right? This is what Naomi's doing. And like when I read this story, I related a lot to Naomi. I was like, man, there's been so many times where like I couldn't hear God and I was confused. And like instead of running to him in the pain, I ran away. And I ran away from the people that loved me. And I ran away from everything I knew I was, like just because I was hurt. And like we may read this and go like, Naomi, why are you doing that? But like it's a common reaction, right? But like, as you read this story, you see like the Lord was still in this, right? She had lost her husband, lost her sons, but the Lord was still providing and he was still redeeming everything that she lost. Because with Ruth found Boaz. The Lord directed her to Boaz and was able to work for food in his field. Work for money, work to provide for Naomi. Like the Lord's hand was on this. But Naomi, all she needed to do really was take a step back, look at her surroundings, and see where the Lord's hand was. And I think like just in our lives, our circumstances, they can get messy. But what we need to do is just take a step back and look to see where God is in that, you know, and like look to see how he's still working and he's still providing for us and he's still moving, even like when we're clouded by our pain and our suffering. So yeah, with that, like I prepared this and I prepared it short, so sorry, but I just want to encourage you that like if you are in a situation where you don't hear God and you're confused, that you may feel blinded by him, or not by him obviously, blinded by your circumstances. Or even just like in the future if this does happen, because, you know, sadly we are going to go through things and we are going to go through suffering and circumstances that aren't the best and not fun. But I want to encourage you to take a step back and just kind of like remove yourself from it and just see where God's hand is. One thing that kind of changed my life was this person who's like staying in like a constant form of worship always keeps your eye on him. And you like always kind of like see where he is, whether that be like looking at creation. Creation is like number one to like seeing God, you know? So like looking at the sunset, man, every time I see those, I'm like, wow, the Lord did good today, right? But just kind of like seeing where he is in your life kind of helps you like zone back into him and forgetting about like the pain. Like obviously you're still gonna feel it, but it's like, okay, like he's still working in the situation. He's always working, even in our suffering. But I just want to encourage you guys with that to just always look for God in every circumstance you're in. Yeah. I love you all so much, and I'm very happy to see you guys, even if it's just for a short bit. But